Well, let's talk about this with Dave Neita, who's a lawyer and poet. He's also from the BME Lawyers for Grenfell Group. Good morning to you, Dave.
Good morning,
Julia.
Now,
you're
helping to me on the program.
Lovely to talk to you. You're helping to represent, provide legal representation for those who lost their loved ones or lost their homes in the fire.
Well yes. Two things, Julia. If I just clear up at the outset that I'm not actually legally representing anybody from Grenfell.
Okay.
But I am just a part of a group that is putting pressure on the government to do the right thing. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'd like to applaud you in the way you framed this whole conversation, that it's actually at the opposite end of the rich list that just was published yesterday in the Times. And actually you're right to put it there because it is really at the opposite. And I like to use that same metaphor, using the whole idea of white goods, where, we have these kitchen appliances like refrigerators and so on. And you have, and at the moment, I've been talking to experts on fire safety and so on. And we have two choices when we buy white goods in our home. There's ones that will blow up in your homes and they're cheap and so on. And there are ones that are made properly because they have the proper backing, the aluminum backing and so on, that really keeps them safe. And Grenfell is really a metaphor for a cheap white good. And it's not the decision of the people to have Grenfell in that way. As we know, The Guardian reported recently that plans to make it safe with a safe aluminum cladding was rejected by the officials.
Okay, Dave, can I step in there? Okay, the key analogy you're making about the cheap white goods, of course, is the fire was started, we know now, by a fridge on the 4th floor of the tower, and it spread to the exterior and spread rapidly. Okay, and it's believed this to be one of these many. I mean, and there are hundreds of thousands, probably millions of these fridges and other white goods that have been made and sold like that. Well, they're not always just the cheap ones, by the way. An awful lot of people will have these goods. They're sold in. They're recommended by which and sold in John Lewis, for goodness' sake.
Let's call them unsafe. Yes.
Well, okay. They shouldn't be in anyone's home, whether they're rich or poor. That's an irrelevance. Okay, Dave. But
no. But Julia, you missed the whole point. I'm not talking about the white goods inside.
I know you are. I know you are. But
the white good itself, Grenfell itself.
Dave, I understand the concept of a metaphor. Thank you. Right.
Yes.
Let's talk about this now. We know all the reports, and there was this report from The Guardian saying that there was a decision to basically documents have shown, which is what everyone had always suspected. There's very little new information actually. Most of this information we had pretty much on June the 15th, the day after the Grenfell Tower fire. In terms of the decisions, the hugely poor decision making by the local council and by the board that was actually running the refurbishment of this building. But we also know that this refurbishment was very similar to refurbishments that have happened in 100+ tower blocks around the country. Councils of all different political persuasions, private blocks run by private firms, hospitals, student accommodation blocks, schools and the like. The issue surely is not one of poverty, not one of race, diversity, all these other issues that have been brought up, but simply an issue of really, really poor management and poor decision-making and a total abject failure of safety on the basis that it shouldn't be possible to buy cladding that's flammable. Yeah. It should be illegal to make it and to sell it.
I totally agree with you. I totally and absolutely agree with you. But when you're talking about all these places, you come back to the original framing of the conversation of the super rich versus the nobodies. And you will not find these materials in the homes of the super rich. And when we're in a country...
That's not true. No, Dave, that's my whole point. That's not true. There are plenty of private blocks that will have had this stuff put on them.
In the billionaires, you will not find knowingly.
No one did it knowingly.
Putting themselves in situations where goods, but tests have been made on some of these goods, and people knew that they were inferior goods, that they were unsafe, that they were, and it's not just about the claddings, it's about escape routes and all that. We cannot get away from the fact that people who are from a particular community, and you read The Guardian this
What community?
Morning, and you read about
what community? What community are you talking about?
Sorry?
You said people from a particular community. What community are you talking about?
I thought we're talking about Grenfell. I thought we're talking about...
That's not a community. It's a bunch of people living in the same tower block. It's not a community.
I'm talking about people who are not the beneficiaries of the economic system that we have today.
Well, wait a second. Wait a minute. They're living in West London in a council block, in a prime location, and they're not beneficiaries of the... A political system? You're kidding
where
me.
you're living. It is the conditions you're living in. Don't have this kind of attitude where you're living in Kensington, you should be lucky. I'm not lucky if I'm living
I can't afford
in
to live in Kensington.
I want to live in dignity. Don't put me in a location and say, I'm in Hampstead, I'm lucky. No, if I'm in Hampstead and I'm living in indignity, I'm not lucky.
Okay,
Don't
Dave, the point is, Dave, you're not on a podium now. We're trying to have a conversation. That involves two-way street. Listen, it's absolutely appalling what happened, and there is no sane or person with a heart in this country who isn't appalled by what happens. And I think most people agree bad decision making was done, possibly criminal, and people should lose their jobs. Some people should probably end up in prison. It's been a bad decision making across the board, but the way this has been framed as an attack, an attack the poor, that the idea that people are going, they're poor, a lot of them are black, it doesn't matter, I find quite bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand. I also don't understand why someone can't sit on a... Let me finish.
Let me jump in.
No, I'm not letting you jump in. I don't understand why someone has to be black or have to be coming from a council estate to be able to sit on a panel. Why do you think that it matters what colour someone's skin is to sit on a panel?
Well, black is a metaphor. We'll come back to metaphor.
It's not a metaphor.
Black is a metaphor. Look at the list. Just look at the list that the Guardian published this morning and look at the makeup of the people.
Why is that relevant?
Ask yourself this. Why is it that in this country, when we need a moral tone, we need to go to campaigners, we need to go to musical artists, the people who are setting the moral tone, the very people of Grenfell warned about this, and it's not the officials, it's not the government. The very people of Grenfell held a diary and they warned about this. But how do you trust and believe in people who all they are people from a community who talk about diversity and the importance? No, what you do to those people, you don't listen to them, and you try to actually ship them out of London. And I'm suggesting...
Dave, what you've just said is genuinely complete nonsense.
Where everybody's valued and people's voices are valued.
No. People, no. They didn't put the clad. They didn't do the works to do the cladding. They made a terrible decision. The local Labour council in my local borough, they've done exactly the same kind of cladding on a tower block there. The reality is, if you look at the people who are living in that block, frankly, there were quite a lot of people who got no business living in a council block. There were lots of private tenants. There were an awful lot of people who were very lucky who've come to this country and have been given a home paid for by taxpayers.
Of Grenfell. Some people have no business. Is that the conversation for the 1-year anniversary of what is happening? So
now we're being told what we can and can't say.
Talking about that is kind of obfuscation going down.
Dave, I realise as a white middle-class woman who didn't grow up on a council estate, I'm not allowed to give an opinion. I realise that. I'm the wrong colour, I'm the wrong class.
You're entitled to an opinion, but what helps is useful conversation about how this can never happen again.
But no, because the conversation should be about who made the decision, why did they make that decision, and who's to blame, and how do we stop these decisions being made ever again? Not about what colour skin someone had and how awful it is that people live in council flats. These people...
So you think race has nothing to... The UN inspector for race just came
She's
here
an idiot.
and did a report.
She's an idiot. She offered no evidence. She offered not a single shred of evidence.
Race has nothing to do with it.
Dave, she said, the country will become more racist since Brexit. There's simply no evidence for this whatsoever.
There is evidence that we are more tolerant, that this country has been more tolerant to racist attitudes and all kind of attitudes against religions and people and so on. And that's been published. But of course, we don't have time for experts no more. We don't need to listen to the experts. And not even a pause. She
doesn't have any expertise. That's why we're not listening to her. Look, the reality is, this is about a tragedy that cost 72 innocent people's lives. We need to get justice for those people and their families. We need to get these people rehoused, and we need to make sure this never happens again. What is all this debate about diversity and race? What has that got to do with any of those aims?
When you go to the docks where St. George's are building these fantastic overlooking the river, you're not seeing fires breaking out there. Where do you see them? Lacanau House. You see them in these areas. So what I'm saying is that do not ignore the obvious.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree, Dave. Dave Neita is a lawyer and poet. He's from BME Lawyers for Grenfell, not representing a particular family, but a part of the campaign for justice for Grenfell. Yeah, I just find it utterly bizarre that we've made this about race. I mean, well, not we. Some people have made this about race. I don't think it is about race. I'm not even sure it's about people being poor. I think private tenants in a private block would have been ignored by the people who own the block because that's what happens. That's the reality. But what happened was awful, absolutely awful, and needs to be prevented from happening again. We need to get justice. But that doesn't mean that people died because they were black or poor.